Is that recording? I can't see. Oh, it is. Okay, great. Perfect. Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. As I mentioned, our webinar tonight focuses on new zones and the proposed rezoning effort. That's part of the city's comprehensive zoning code update. And this webinar is the last in our four-part series. Our previous webinar recordings are available on our project webpage. This event is also being recorded and will be posted on our project website for anyone who can't attend live or if you want to revisit the slides and the recording at a later date. So tonight we'll cover a brief background on why this work is happening. We'll talk a bit about what zoning is and why it matters, why some properties are proposed to be rezoned, and then what these changes mean. And finally, we'll show you how to review the proposals and provide feedback on our interactive zoning map platform. So first, we want to provide just a little bit of background. As you hopefully know, the city adopted the 2040 General Plan in February 2024. The General Plan is Sacramento's long-term vision for growth and development, and it establishes policies for housing, transportation, climate action, economic development, as well as many other topics. The zoning code update we're discussing today is one of the primary implementation tools for putting that vision into practice. So we're not developing new policy direction through this process, but rather implementing policy that has already been adopted. The goals and policies of the general plan are based on these themes: sustainable and responsible growth, resiliency and climate action, safe, equitable, and just city, regional economic hub, livability and sense of place, and an interconnected, accessible city. So in short, the general plan provides broad policy direction, and then based on this direction, the zoning code provides detailed regulations about what can be built and where. And state law requires that these two documents be consistent with one another. So that's one of the primary reasons we're updating our zoning code today. So our webinar tonight is going to focus on three parts of this project: simplifying residential zoning, rezoning properties for general plan consistency, and streamlining the code. These are just three components of a much larger zoning code update that also includes neighborhood commercial uses, missing middle housing, and transit-oriented development. So before discussing rezoning, I think it's helpful to define zoning. Zoning divides all land within the city into different areas or zones. So each parcel has a zoning designation, and that zoning determines what land uses are allowed and what development standards apply. So within the city of Sacramento, we have agricultural and open space zones, residential zones, commercial zones, industrial zones. And then examples of development standards include setbacks, building height, and lot coverage. So together, these rules help make sure different land uses like homes, shops, and parks work well together. So our zoning map implements the general plan land use designations through those more detailed zones. And one thing I want to note when we're talking about this work, there are over 154,000 parcels in the city. So there was a lot to review. This has been a tremendous effort, not just for our team, but also for other staff citywide that we've coordinated with on this work. And we'll talk more about the rezoning map at the end of the webinar, including a demonstration of how to use that interactive map to make comments on our proposed rezones. So there are two major changes that we're going to talk about today: simplifying our residential zones and rezoning for consistency with the general plan. We'll also touch briefly on some technical and streamlining changes that are being made to the code. So the 2040 general plan simplified residential land use designations and removed the limit on the number of housing units allowed on a lot. Thus, we're updating our zoning code to consolidate and simplify residential zones and remove maximum density from the zoning code. As you can see, the 2035 general plan had many different residential land use designations, which were differentiated largely by density. The 2040 general plan simplified residential land use designations into two broad categories: neighborhood and residential mixed use. So to better align the zoning code with our new framework, we're consolidating our existing residential zoning districts into a smaller number of new zones. Each zone helps answer two questions. What can you do on a property? So a zone will tell you what land uses like housing, retail stores, restaurants are allowed. And then how big can your building be? A zone will include development standards, like how close a building can be to property lines. If you look at the table, you'll see the existing residential zones on the left from R1 through RO. These zones were largely based on the old general plan and had different maximum densities. Under the 2040 general plan, we're moving away from that maximum density. So because of that change, we don't need as many separate residential zones. We're consolidating them into a simpler set of zones, N1, N2, N3, and RMX, to implement the neighborhood and residential mixed-use plan designations, general plan designations. So starting with N1, we're combining the existing R1, R1A, R1B, and R2 zones. These are currently our single unit and duplex residential zones. The new N1 zone will also incorporate the updated missing middle housing standards, allowing a broader range of housing types. Missing middle housing was covered in detail in a webinar last week, so we're not going to focus on it tonight, but you can find the recording and slides for that webinar on our project webpage. The N2 zone combines the existing R2A, R2B, R3, and R3A zones. These zones already allow lower intensity multi-unit housing without all of the missing middle housing requirements. N2 provides a transition from missing middle housing to somewhat higher intensity residential development. Both N1 and N2 zones would also allow limited neighborhood commercial uses on corner lots. Again, we're not going to spend much time on that tonight because we covered it in detail during a neighborhood commercial webinar, which you can also find on our website. The N3 zone combines the existing R4, R4A, and R5 zones. This combines existing multi-unit dwelling zones into our highest intensity neighborhood zone. And N3 includes standards for larger multi-unit residential development, as well as a broader range of neighborhood commercial uses than N1 and N2. Finally, the existing RMX and RO zones will be consolidated into a single RMX zone, which continues to allow a mix of residential and commercial uses while encouraging housing with ground floor retail and neighborhood serving businesses in appropriate locations. The overall goal of this consolidation is to create a zoning framework that's easier to understand while still distinguishing between different levels of development intensity. So, as mentioned on the previous slide, the zoning district helps answer the question, how big can it be? But one significant change behind this new zoning framework is that the 2040 general plan removed maximum residential density from residential zones. Now, this doesn't mean that development is unlimited. Instead of regulating projects based on the number of dwelling units per acre, development is governed primarily by objective standards that regulate the size of the building. So these include floor area ratio, or FAR, as well as building height, setbacks, lot coverage, and other site development standards. In practice, these standards determine the size of a building rather than the number of housing units within it. And one of the key standards is FAR, or floor area ratio. FAR is calculated by dividing building area by lot area. So for example, a 5,000 square foot parcel with an FAR of 1 could have a maximum building area of 5,000 square feet. If the FAR was 2, the maximum building area would be 10,000 square feet. And it's important to understand how zones and FAR work together. The zones represent different levels of development intensity and establish overall development pattern. As you move from N1 to N2 to N3, the zones generally allow greater development intensity and a broader range of uses. But the FAR is not the same for every property within a zone. FAR is assigned to individual properties by the general plan. So the zone establishes the general development pattern, and the FAR helps determine how much building area is appropriate for a particular property. So for example, in the N1 zone, where missing middle housing is allowed, some properties may have an FAR of 1, while others may have an FAR of 2. These properties are in the same zoning district, they have the same allowed uses, but the general plan envisions different amounts of building area in FAR1 areas as it does for FAR2. During the general plan update, every parcel in the city was assigned an FAR based on its location and planned development pattern. And in general, higher FARs are found in the central city, near transit, and along major commercial corridors, while lower FARs are assigned to neighborhood areas further from transit. The key takeaway here is that the zone tells us the general development pattern and what uses are allowed, and the FAR tells us how much building area is appropriate. One of the biggest changes to our development standards in this update is how we propose to regulate building height. Under the current zoning code, each of those zones from R1 to RO had its own maximum height limit. But that approach doesn't always work well when properties within a zone can have different FARs. So for example, the same building height limit might not make sense for a property with an FAR of 1, 2, or 4. So under the new zoning code, maximum building height would be determined by the maximum FAR in the general plan, rather than being tied to the zoning district. You can see in the top table the maximum building heights for each FAR and type of zone, so whether it's residential, commercial, or industrial. There are greater heights for commercial properties with an FAR of 1 and 2 to encourage development along commercial corridors. And there are greater heights in industrial zones for FARs 1 and 2 because the industrial zones already allow 70 feet to accommodate industrial uses like warehouses. The table at the bottom of this slide shows the proposed transitional height standards, which would require buildings to step down in height as they approach abutting lots with an FAR of 1, so the maximum height being 35 feet. The goal of transitional heights is to allow the scale of development envisioned in the general plan, while also providing a transition between areas of different development intensity. So moving on to rezoning for general plan consistency. As I mentioned in our introduction, state law requires that our zoning code be consistent with the general plan. The general plan update rendered some parcels inconsistent. So this rezoning process brings that zoning code back into alignment with the general plan. And we've gotten a few questions asking how we went about this rezoning process, and it was not an automated exercise. Our staff identified potential zoning and general plan land use inconsistencies, and we evaluated affected properties and determined whether rezoning was warranted. And we developed rezoning changes, which are reflected on that interactive rezoning map, which we'll look at in a few moments. And the goal has really been to make thoughtful recommendations rather than simply applying blanket changes. In addition to rezoning, both simplifying those residential zones and rezoning for general plan consistency, we're also improving usability of our code by streamlining a bit. We're removing outdated zoning suffixes that no longer have meaning in the code, such as the -R and -FF suffixes. And we're also proposing to remove obsolete planned unit developments, or PUDs, in areas where development has been completed and or where development agreements have expired. And you can find a map of the PUDs that we're proposing to remove on our project webpage. And these changes hopefully make the code easier for residents, property owners, and staff to understand. So what will this zoning code update do? I think an important thing to really make clear is that zoning changes affect future development. It doesn't make existing homes or businesses illegal. Existing legally established uses remain legal, and not all properties will be rezoned. And overall, the development standards established in the zoning code determine which projects can be approved administratively at a staff level and which require a public hearing. So with that, we want to shift our attention to how you can provide input on our proposed rezones. We are in the midst of our outreach period, and we still want input on all of this. And we'll walk through, again, that interactive map in just a moment. And along with the interactive map, you can review a wide range of informational materials. You can submit comments both directly on the map. We also welcome folks to email our project team. You can also call us at the number on your screen and leave a message. Our outreach period is going to end on August 31st. So we would love for folks to provide input by then. We also have an upcoming meeting of the Planning and Design Commission where we'll be reporting back on some of our outreach and giving sort of an update on this project we would love for folks to come and make comments there, either by submitting an e-comment or coming in person to provide a live comment. That meeting is this Thursday evening at 5:30. And so with that, I'm gonna shift over to sharing our interactive map demo. I hope folks will bear with me. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for just a second while I shift over because I have to change from PowerPoint to our interactive map. So give me one sec. Okay. Let's see. Share my screen again. Hopefully this will work. Okay. So hopefully you can see our project web page. And so this is the 2040 General Plan and Zoning Consistency webpage. And there's a few things. There's a range of information on the project, which I encourage everyone to check out, including a Zoning 101 handout. And then there's a couple links down here. So we have our provide feedback link, which will take you to our Conveo page, which is sort of this interactive online platform. I think some of you are probably already familiar. It has these different project stations for the different topics that we've covered as part of our project scope. And so you can take a look at those and make comments. So tonight we're going to be focusing in on new zones and rezoning. So you can take a look at the board, which I'm not going to focus on too much, but it covers a lot of the same things that were covered in this presentation. The presentation was definitely a deeper dive. What we're going to focus on is the interactive rezone map, which is station 4B. So I'm going to click on that. So we apologize for the lengthy introduction text. It's a lot of information to convey, and we want to make sure that folks are well prepared to review the map and make comments. So I'm not going to go through these instructions in detail right now, or I am verbally, but we do encourage you to, when you revisit this map, to come back and look at the instructions. So we have this information about how to explore the map and how to share your feedback and some tips for commenting, which I'll talk about a little bit. I do want to call out, we identified a couple of errors in our map that we had our GIS team correct this afternoon. In the process of doing that, they seem to have turned off one of the layers of our map, which is the old zones. So that's why you're seeing the left side of this screen totally grayed out. The good news is we'll get it back up and running very quickly, and you can also still review all the information even with just this one layer. So for now, what we'll do is toggle this all the way to the left. This is going to show our proposed rezones. Before we click into a full screen of the map, I do want to just point your attention to a couple of resources, some of which are new. So the first being the 2040 General Plan land use and placemaking element. We do encourage you to check that out. It includes sort of definitions for all of those land use designations, which we have used to inform our rezoning efforts. So you can take a look. The link here will bring you to that land use and placemaking element, and you can review that. You can also find more information about that floor area ratio and minimum density as well. To review our current code, you can click the second link, which is Division 2 of the Planning and Development Code. So this is our zones and development standards. So you can see this is what we're working with currently and what we will be updating as part of this process. The two links that we've added pretty recently, so you may not have seen them yet, is our proposed permitted uses guide and our map legend guide and rezone methodology. So the proposed permitted uses guide is sort of, again, telling you what uses would be in those, we can click on it, new zones. So it includes a table of contents, which should be clickable. So you can click on a section of zones. It's going to have the sort of purpose statements for each zone, and it will tell you what type of change is being made, if any. So as you can see, there's no change proposed to the RE zone. And then you can see those end zones that we talked about are consolidation of our R zones. So you can take a look at those definitions. This document, we're hoping folks will sort of concentrate their comments on the map. So this is just for viewing, but you can use that to inform your comments as you look at the map. So we will go back to the map. So I'm gonna go to full screen here, and then I have a few buttons that I want to point out. So in your upper right-hand corner, there are these two buttons that are very important to using this map. There's the comment button and the information button. And so in order to look up information about a parcel, you need to have it toggled to the information button. And so we are I'm gonna show you an example parcel. And so there's a search bar in the bottom right corner, or bottom left corner, sorry. And oops. It should pop up and populate that address. I'm going to search for 1708 58th Street. Okay, so it'll zoom into the map. You can then click on the parcel and it will bring up the information. So you've typed in the address to the search bar. It will populate with the APN, which is the assessor's parcel number. If you're providing a comment right on the map, you can just click on the parcel and it will associate that comment with the parcel. If you are sending us an email with a comment, we do recommend that you either include the address or the APN or both if you want your comment to be associated with a particular parcel. The information also shows you the planning action, and I'll click around a little bit so you can see the different actions, but this one is a rezone. This is a parcel that we are proposing to change from M1, which is an industrial zone, to C1, which is a commercial zone, and really reflecting that residential mixed use land use designation in the general plan. The information also shows you that maximum FAR, so it says a maximum FAR of 4. And then it also shows you the minimum residential density, which is 20 dwelling units per acre. Now, one thing you can see, it's a little bit tough to see on these commercial properties, but there is a red border around this parcel. Those borders do disappear if you zoom out of the map. So you do want to zoom in order to be able to see them. The red border means a rezone. You can also see over here, if we click on this, this is a green border, and that is a consolidate to a new zone. So that's what that green border means. You can see the legend, and it's both in that legend guide that I pointed to as a link, and you can also see it over here if you click on that sort of stat icon. So you can see that the green border is consolidate to a new zone. The red border is rezone. The yellow border is a technical change. So that's that removal of suffixes or removal of planned unit developments. And then we also have no change, which will have no border. So here you can see this is a consolidate to a residential zone. Over here, this is a parcel with no change, so it has no border. So it's just the planning action is no change. The old zone M1, new zone M1 as well. So you can take a look. So this is the information side of things. If you want to make comments and interact with other comments in the platform, you can do so by clicking on the comment bubble. If we zoom out a little bit, you can see that folks have made some comments. We can click on those. Here we have a comment from Autumn that says, I think areas around parks should be higher zoning to give people immediate access to parks and allow more commercial next to parks. All parks should have a corner store across the street. If you want to reply to that comment, you can click on the reply button. It will prompt you to put your name and your email address in it. It's not going to show your email address, but it will give it to us. And then you can also like the comment or dislike the comment. If you want to make a new comment, you can do that as well. So say I wanted to comment on this parcel, I could just click there, fill in my name, email, and my comment. You do have to agree to the terms and conditions the first time you comment, and that's it. So I think with that, we will stop sharing. Hopefully that is helpful in orienting folks to the interactive map, and we can pause there and answer any questions that folks might have. And so I haven't been looking at the Q&A.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. We've got one question in the Q&A. It says, what does it mean when parcels in brown change to yellow? And Laura, it might be helpful if maybe we open up the methodology doc so folks get a sense for what that looks like.
The short answer is that, well, I think that's not gonna they're not talking about a border, so it's not in the methodology document, but I can share what it means. The zones are associated with a color. And so in instances, you can see in the map, and it's a little tricky right now because half of our map is not showing up. So I think this is someone who probably has looked at the map when both sides of it were working. But basically, if it's brown going to yellow, it's likely one of those R zones becoming an N zone. So you're going to see the colors reduce on the new zone side because there's fewer zones in our new framework. So that I think the brown was like maybe like R2B and it becomes an N zone and is yellow.
Yeah, that's helpful to know. We have another question. Can you show us how to get to the map again and the link?
Yes, so I think we can put the link. Hopefully, are you able to answer that? Are participants able to see the chat or no? We have
No,
to. Okay,
participants can't see the chat.
but we can put it in the Q&A. We can put a
Yes,
link in
yeah,
the
I
Q&A.
can.
Okay, we will do that, and I will share my screen once again. Just a second. So you can get there a couple ways. There's our project webpage, which if you Google 2040 General Plan and Zoning Consistency, you could get there. I think it's probably also on your webinar registration, and we'll put this in the Q&A as well. You can either click this provide feedback link, and that will bring you to that sort of general Conveo board, which I can show you. You can also scroll down just a little bit more and click on this interactive rezone map, and it will bring you right there. And then if you want to go, if you start at the map and you want to go back to the view all the other boards, you can click return to homepage and you can view all of the different stations. So we still have many other opportunities for interaction beyond the map, but that's how you get there.
Great, thanks, Laura. Next question is, can you please provide an example of how transitional building heights under the new zoning and FAR would work?
Yeah, I might kick that over to Jamie if she wants to put on
It's a
camera.
good
I don't
one for
know.
Jamie.
Yeah.
Hi. Yeah, Jamie Moser, associate planner. I can answer that. So some of our commercial corridors, I'll use Franklin Boulevard as an example. They're commercially zoned and have an FAR 4 right along the corridor, but then directly behind that, you're going to have a property that's N1 with an FAR 1 and a height of 35 feet per the height table that Laura showed. So that rear 20 feet of the property that's commercial FAR 4 would have a height limit of 45 feet. The next 20 feet of the property would go up to 65 feet. And then after that, they'd be able to hit their max height of 85 feet. So it's like wedding caking up to the maximum height. They'll still be able to hit their maximum height further from the N1 35-foot height zone area. It's just stepping up to that. So hopefully that helps answer it.
Great, thanks, Jamie. Next question is, will the new zoning be compliant with the densities and intensities specified by the airport land use compatibility plans for SMF and Sacramento executive airports? I can answer that briefly. Yeah, our zoning our zoning code is still compliant with SMF and in Sacramento executive airport compatibility plans. And so any additional restrictions around safety still apply, regardless of what we're changing in the base zone. All right, great question though. Next question is, can you provide some clarity around the new zones N1, N2, and N3? They all seem to be indicating missing middle housing or higher intensity and commercial uses. Is the city, in essence, eliminating low density housing with no commercial?
You know, you want to go ahead,
Yeah,
Amy?
yeah, I can start it, and then anyone else can feel free to jump in. So N1, N2, and N3, basically they're all just increasing in intensities for our new neighborhood zones. N1 is where our missing middle housing standards will live. N2 is meant to be a transition between N1 and N3. So this was our existing multi-unit buildings, like lower intensity multi-unit buildings. And then N3 is where we're going to see like the apartment buildings. And so this in all three zones, we will have commercial uses. In N1 and N2, these are going to be pretty new to these areas. Currently, these areas don't allow for neighborhood commercial uses. And so with our update, we are proposing to introduce neighborhood commercial uses. Areas that are becoming N3, these already see commercial uses. So they're honestly, these areas probably won't see significant changes. And to the question, is the city eliminating low density housing with no commercial? I would say that we're not eliminating low density housing. We're more broadening the range of housing that we're allowing in these areas. And so it's just giving folks more options in terms of what kind of housing can be built in our neighborhoods, not just limiting it to low density. And I would argue that we are increasing the amount of commercial that we're allowing. So quite the opposite of no commercial. Hopefully they answered your question. All right, next question is, on the rezones, does this allow private protected trees to be removed due to the rezone?
I think chapter of city code still stands and folks would still need to go through the process to remove a private protected tree that they would otherwise. And I don't know, Jamie, if you want to add any about coordination with urban forestry about missing middle, but it's a little off topic. We can touch on it maybe really briefly.
Yeah, what you said is true. We're not changing the permit requirement, so there would still be a tree permit requirement if the tree is being removed. That's eligible for that requirement.
Great, thanks both. Next question, will there be more flexibility for ground floor retail? There are many multi-family buildings with vacant ground floor retail, especially affordable housing developments. I can start an answer for this, and Laura and Jamie, feel free to jump in. For the higher intensity zones, we're not touching standards for commercial uses and mixed use developments. What we're doing for commercial uses is just introducing more options for neighborhood commercial in the lower intensity residential zones. Jamie, did you want to add anything else to that? I know you did a
Yeah,
lot of
I can
this.
give more just like in the weed stuff. Everything you said is true. So for the N3 zone, it's consolidating R4, R4A, and R5. Those already allow 25% of the building or 6,400 square feet for certain commercial uses, and we're not changing that. So that'll still be allowed in those zones or in that new zone.
Great, thanks, Jamie.
Mhm.
All right, next question. What buildings are 35 feet?
Maybe if someone could, Charlene, if you could offer a clarification, are you asking for an example of a building that is 35 feet tall? Maybe type your answer if or the question. It's going to FAR1 is the 35-foot buildings, but if you're looking for sort of a like, what does the 35-foot building feel like? We can try to think about that a little bit more. Off the top of my head, I don't. I see Remy just came off or on camera, so
Yeah, no,
yeah.
it's just I don't know if there were perhaps we could add a little bit to that just to indicate that 3 stories would be the max, right? That you could typically do with 35 feet in the residential zone. So those are the type of development you see 3-story neighborhood apartments that could be constructed within the residential neighborhoods as an example.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So yeah, a single family home would typically be a little bit less than 35 feet if it was a sort of 2-story home, but it could be a 3-story.
Yeah, I'll just add on the Conveo thing that Laura showed for missing little housing. We have a poster and there's a rendering of a 3-story building that is 35 feet tall as an example.
Awesome, thank you. Next question. If you are allowing more commercial, are you expecting that more shelters can go in any suburban neighborhood?
I can answer that one. We aren't making any changes to where shelters are allowed as part of this update. So the neighborhood commercial piece is just looking at things like retail stores, coffee shops, laundromats, commercial services like a hair salon. So more of those kinds of uses is what would be changed through that.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. Next question. Could you explain the elimination of PUDs, where to find the list of PUDs being eliminated, and if non-expired PUDs are being limited, what is the reasoning? I can start by answering that. In the meantime, Laura, do you mind navigating back to Conveo and sharing your screen? Yeah, so as Laura said in the presentation, we're looking at PUDs, plan unit developments that either have expired development agreements or have already been fully built out. And for both of these reasons, the PUDs themselves don't have a lot of weight in terms of development in those areas anymore. And so, from our perspective, it's a matter of cleanup. And in terms of rezoning, it'll mean that parcels previously in that PUD would have had that PUD suffix. We're going to be removing that PUD suffix, and those PUD regulations would not be there anymore. Let me see. Let me go back to the question to see if there's any other part that I didn't answer. Um,
Amy, is just if you look at this page again on Conveo, it's a little bit hard, tricky to see, but it says to see a list of PUDs proposed for removal, you can click here. So you can see that. Here you can see the list, and then you can go back and look at the map. So there's the list.
Great. Yeah. Yeah. So that's a great place to look. And I think the second part of the question, if non-expired PUDs are being eliminated, what is the reasoning? We are not proposing to eliminate any non-expired PUDs. And I think some of the comments that we're looking for this PUD portion of our project is, have we did we get ahead of ourselves, right? Like, does this PUD still serve a function that maybe we did not think about? These are the types of things that would be really helpful to understand through the comments. And that's why we're having this out here for public discussion. All right, next question is, will liquor stores and pot shops be allowed in N1 and N2 zones? I think, Jamie, that's a good one for you.
No, they won't be allowed. I'll still just push the webinar we had a couple weeks ago on neighborhood commercial. Goes through all of those standards in more detail. But yeah, cannabis and alcohol uses would not be allowed in the N1 and N2 zones.
Thank you. There, just leaving a note to remind folks to go see the webinar. Next question is, will the changes allowing new commercial and residential zones result in cannabis bars or businesses? And I think, yeah, I would rely on Jamie's previous answer.
Yeah, no, they would not be allowed.
Yeah, thanks. All right, I think we have cleared the Q&A box, but if you have any others, please type them in there, or you can request to come off mute, and you're very welcome to ask the question live. Okay, we got another one. Can we explain why a 3-story building would be put in a residential neighborhood? Jamie, I think this was a good one for you too, if you want to take it.
Yeah, I can answer that. So the current R1 zone and a lot of zones that are going into N1 have a maximum height of 35 feet already. But for a long time, we had this thing that's known as the bulk control tent. So after the second floor, the third floor would have to taper in. But we did a workshop with City Council and looking at, wanting to broaden the range of housing types, have more growth near transit, receive direction to look at removing that bulk control tent. And so that would allow a full third-story building in those zones. So it's not that the height limit is necessarily changing in 1.0 FAR areas. It's that the bulk control tent is going away. And then in FAR 2, we're looking at increasing from 35 to 45 feet, which is making the building taller. But those areas are located near transit, and we're trying to implement policy direction to focus growth near transit. So those are the reasons why for the height changes as part of this update.
Great, thanks, Jamie. All right, any more questions? All right, we've got one that came in. Are there going to be any limits in regions for high density? I might ask for some additional clarification on what kind of limits you're asking about. Feel free to type in a clarifying question in there.
And Amy, maybe we can just say that outside of the central business district, right, everything does have a height limit and a building square footage limit as well, based on the general plan FAR and the associated height. So there are height limits for majority development that's going to be allowed.
Great, thanks, Remy. We also have a question on are there any smoke-free requirements, including the zoning, and where would I find more information on this? Are you, I would also ask for more clarification on this question in terms of, are you asking for guidance on where to find this in the zoning code? And are you asking about cannabis or general smoking regulations? So yeah, if you could provide additional, oh yeah,
And
yes, both tobacco and cannabis. Yeah, Remy, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say our work on this part of the rezone is not addressing that specific topic.
Oh, this, yeah.
Yeah.
I might recommend that you reach out to planning at cityofsacramento.org for more information on that. All right. Question, what does a minimum residential density of 3 mean?
I can answer that. It means a minimum residential density of 3 dwelling units per acre. So in Sacramento, not super common to see a parcel that's an acre. So you have to do a little bit of math, but it would be a sort of minimum on the number of dwelling units. So it's sort of incentivizing or looking to see, more than just oftentimes it does result in just a single unit on a lot, but you have to do a little calculation of dwelling units per acre.
Yeah, good answer, Laura. And I think that the commenter is probably referring to the parcel that was shown on the screen earlier that showed a minimum of 3, but throughout the city we have different minimums. So some may be 8 units an acre, 15 units an acre, 18 units an acre, depending on the minimum intensity that's required throughout the city.
Great. We have a couple more questions that came in. Can developers still get variances, special permits, etc., in all zones?
I can answer that. So typically call them deviations. So we'll use height as an example. Say someone wanted to exceed the 35 or the 45 feet, they could request a deviation, which means you'll go to a director level hearing, which is online on Thursday. The neighbors are noticed, so that process still exists. And then special permits, we now call conditional use permits. So if there's a use that we think might have an impact on a neighborhood, it will also require a public hearing either at the zoning administrator or the planning and design commission level. Neighbors would get noticed on that as well.
Great, thanks, Jamie. All right, our next question. Can you have 100,000 units in a 200-acre area, or is there a limit? I would say I did some quick math, and that looks like it's about 500 dwelling units per acre, which is very, very high. In some areas, depending on the FAR, we do not have a height limit, but there is an FAR limit. So there is still a maximum to how big buildings can be. And I think that in itself would limit how many units you can get in any particular building and therefore in any particular area. So I would say it just really depends. All right. Any other questions? Great questions so far. If none, maybe Laura, I'll turn it back to you to wrap things up.
Great, thank you, Amy. And thanks everyone for such fantastic questions. So I want to just share my screen one more time. We have just another slide or two. So again, just to remind everyone, on August 13th, we'll be presenting to the Planning and Design Commission. We will be talking about our proposed changes to the zoning code and then a summary of our outreach to date. Folks are invited and encouraged to provide public comment. If you want to come in person, you can come to City Hall. There's information online about how to access the meeting materials. And you can also submit an e-comment if you're not able to attend in person. We are, as I mentioned, wrapping up our outreach period on August 31st, and we will be working on writing this ordinance that, sort of combines all aspects of this work. And then our public hearings will begin in October. We'll be going to back to the Planning Design Commission with a goal of going in December to City Council for adoption. And so you can contact us at zoningcodeupdate@cityofsacramento.org or give us a call and leave us a voicemail and we will get back to you. And we look forward to hearing from folks by August 31st. If you run into any issues with the interactive map, please do let us know. It's a fantastic tool, but it's, as we saw tonight with part of it being down, it's a little bit finicky. So we appreciate everyone's patience and we're trying our best to get the information out there. But if you have questions about a specific parcel and you want to know, how the rezoning might affect you, please do reach out and we will get back to you as soon as we can. So thanks so much to everyone for joining us tonight, and I hope everyone has a great evening.